All right. Well, like I was saying, we're doing the quadratic formula, and as most of you couldn't see it, we had x equals, well, I won't read it out here. There it is in the top right-hand corner. That is the quadratic formula. Again, the reason we use it is when you can't factor, or maybe the numbers are crazy big that you'd be all day trying to factor it, or maybe they're decimals, same idea, where it'd be really, really difficult to factor it. So those are a few different ways that we might factor. All right, so again, what it's used for is solving a quadratic equation in standard form, right? Vertex form doesn't work because in vertex form we have A's, H's, and K's. Well, that's not in this formula. Those A, B's, and C's refer to the A being the number in front of the x squared, B being the number in front of the x, and C, of course, being the number at the end. All right, so again, I'm going to get back to our first question here. Example 1. The flight of an air balloon is given by the equation h equals negative 2x squared plus x, where x is our time in hours, and h is the time meter, or height in meters. And I want to know, when is the air balloon at a height of 2 meters? All right, so that means our h value is 2. And again, in math, anytime you're trying to solve an equation, you got to know everything but one thing. And well, we have h's and x's here. So I'm going to substitute 2 in for h. And there we go. Now, again, here's the thing with the quadratic formula. Just like when we were solving by factoring, you have to have a 0 on one side. Even though we're not using the zero product property, the development of the quadratic formula requires that you have a 0 on one side. And so just like I did with factoring, I'm going to move that 2 over to the other side. And so I have my 0 on the one side of the equation. I have my minus 2x squared plus 7x. Again, that 2 is moving over to the other side, so it is a minus 2. All right, now, here's where I'm now going to use the quadratic formula. And again, my a is the number in front of the x squared, my b is the number in front of the x, and my c is the number afterwards. And so I'm going to substitute into my equation, so way over there. So I got x equals, it says negative b. Well, b is 7, so I'm going to have a minus 7 instead. That negative b means the sign changes. There's our plus or minus sign. We've dealt with that before. Then we have the square root of 7, or of b, which is 7. So I'm going to have 7 squared minus 4 times a, which is a negative 2, times c, which is a negative 2. And of course, the part I can't forget, down here, times 2a, which means 2 times negative 2. All right, well, we got to do a little bedmas, so I'm going to start off with my special bracket here inside the square roots. So I've got x is equal to minus 7 plus or minus. Let's see in here. So 7 squared is 49. Now, this is what a lot of students struggle with, is the second part of this, getting the sign right. The number's fine, it's the sign. So what I like to do is figure out what the sign is beforehand. So I got a minus sign, a minus sign, a minus sign. Well, the 2 minuses give me a plus, but then times the third minus gives me a negative. So I'm going to have a minus sign. Whatever that number is, it's going to be a minus. Well, then I got 4 times 2, which is 8, times 2, which is 16. And down the bottom here, I have, well, 2 times negative 2 is a minus 4. All right, so things are getting simpler, which is always key in math. And so we have x is equal to negative 7 plus or minus the square root. I take 49 minus 16. I got a 33. And then divide by negative 4. All right, I keep going. I'm going to find out the square root of 33, which is going to not be a nice number. So let's see here. So I got minus 7 plus or minus, and I take the square root of 33. Just grab my calculator here. And I end up with 5.74. All over negative 4. All right, now here's the second part or second place where students typically mess up here. Is that here's what we got. What I have to do is figure out the top first before I divide by that -4. Dividing by that -4 is the last thing I'm going to do. All right, so I'm going to write it out separate here. So I'm going to have x equals -7 plus 5.74, then divided by -4. That's going to give me one answer. And my second answer, I'm going to take -7 minus 5.74. And again, the last thing I'm going to do is divide by the -4. All right, and so my two answers, I get -7 plus 5.74, and then divided by -4, I get 0.32. And I'm going to get two answers here. I take -7, subtract 5.74, so I'm going to have -12.74. Then divided by -4, I get 3.19. And so again, I get decimal answers. And so again, this is a word problem. So I'm going to write a therefore statement. So therefore, the balloon was at a height of 2 meters after 0.32 seconds or 32 hours, I believe. Let me read the question. Yeah, hours, air balloon. And 3.19 hours. And so again, if I was looking at this equation, -2, that's our a value in front of the x squared. It's negative, which means this parabola opens down. And so it looks like 0.32 hours would represent the time going up for this balloon, and the 3.19 hours would represent on its way down. So it's like about a three and a half hour trip that this air balloon took. All right, let's try another one here. Example 2. That formula there. All right, so example number 2. I think it's about a bird. Let's see, a bird swooping down towards the ground to eat a bug. What bird wouldn't do that? So, example 2. The height of the bird in meters is given by the equation h equals 0.6, so there's our decimals, squared, minus 6, should say minus 6x, plus 19. All right, and I want to know when the bird is at a height of 2.5 meters. All right, so again, just like before, I'm going to substitute that h equals 2.5 in for h. So there we go. All right, and again, when you're solving any quadratic in standard form, you have to have a 0 on one side. So I'm going to move that 2.5 over to the other side. So I'm going to have a big 0 here on the other side. So I got 0.6x squared minus 6x plus 19. Again, the 2.5 is moving over to the other side, so it's a minus 2.5. All right, again, I want this in the form y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. So I got to put these numbers together. So I just have one c value. All right, so I have 0 equals 0.6x squared minus 6x. Let's see here, plus 16.5. $19 minus 250. Yeah, that's right. Actually, yep, 16. All right, good. All right, now, again, if I want to solve this is a classic example when you use a quadratic formula, is that we have decimals. Really hard to factor with decimals, but again, my a is always the number in front of the x squared, no matter which order this is written in. Your a is the number in front of x squared, your b is the number in front of x, and there's your c right there. All right, so now I'm going to substitute into my equation. All right, so up there we have x equals. Now here's something that happens. It says negative b. B is negative, right? By -6. So here's what happens. The negative sign from the b value and the negative sign from the equation come together, and so it's just a 6. It's +6. So that negative b in the quadratic formula flips the sign. That's all it does. All right, then we have plus or minus b squared. Now b is -6, so I'm going to have -6 squared minus 4 times a. A is our decimal here of 0.6 times c, which is our 16.5. All right, and of course divided by our 2a. So 2 times, what's a again? 0.6. All right, here we go. Simplifying things. I'm not gonna, let's see, we'll go up here. Write in a different color. How's that? Change it up. All right, so now I have x equals 6 plus or minus. Now I gotta figure out this part brackets. So -6 squared, again, that's -6 times -6 gives me a positive. Now to figure out the sign here, well, I have a -4 times a positive, that's negative. Times the positive is also going to be negative. So I'm going to have a minus sign here. And I'm going to have to do a little bit of calculator there. So I got 4 times 0.6 times 16.5. I'm getting 39.6. All right, again, divided by, let's see here, 2 times 0.6, 2 times 60 cents, be 1.2. All right, so again, simplifying it. So I got x is equal to 6 plus or minus, let's see, brackets, 36 minus 39.6. That'd be minus 3.6 divided by 1.2. Now, this is something that we had happen with solving quadratic equations when they were in vertex form, when we took the square root. I have the square root of -3.6. We can't take the square root of a negative number. So that means, again, and this happened when we, again, solved in vertex form, the answer is there's no solution. There is no answer because we can't take the square root of a negative number. So in the context of this question, it's asking when does the bird who's swooping down to eat a bug at 2.5, when are they at 2.5 meters? They never get that low, never happens. So therefore, again, it's a word problem, so I need to write a therefore statement, just not no solution. It's the bird never reaches the height of 2.5 meters. It never happens. So again, there's a couple of examples of the quadratic formula. Again, going through some of the things that are tricky. Again, watching your sign underneath the square root button. And again, at the end, the last thing you do is you're going to divide by that denominator to find your 2 answers. Which, if you get 2 answers. Here we had 2 answers, and then we actually had no answers. Now,